You get your first acquisition, your first big acquisition at Silicon Valley at 28 years old, and you're still not fulfilled. So they talk about with his story that he goes out, he gets like a nice fast car, he spends some time because he was always into cars growing up, spends some time having a little bit of fun, but less than 10 months later, he's back in a new business and reinvests almost all of his money because he wasn't fulfilled. All right. So at this point, let's go ahead and go into that next video and we'll kind of see what he did from there.
The goal with in doing my second internet company was to create something that would have a profound effect. And it seems to me that the financial sector had not seen a lot of innovation on the internet. And money is really just an entry in a database. And it's low bandwidth. It seems like it's something that should lend itself to innovation.
He was very rich. I mean, just more money than most people could dream. And he took almost no time in between that sale and starting the company that became PayPal.
I was honestly amazed at that. It's like less than 10 months later, you're investing much of what you earn to go right back into business. And mind you, 22 million, it's not in today's world where we're like, oh, 22 million, that's not a lot. Like we know our favorite athletes sometimes make more than that in a year.
Yep.
This is back in, before I think it was even early 2000. So like 22 million back then, it can stretch a little bit. So what do you think about that? Just like, would you go back into the game that quickly after that big of a win?
You know what? I kind of would, just because it wasn't my money anyways. Like, that's how I feel about it. Like, I mean, I think he thought big picture. And he saw that one thing worked, and so let me do another thing. I didn't have this money before. Now I have it. Let me put it all up again, see if it works. I can't even be mad at that. Hopefully, he spent a little bit on himself, but we saw that it worked. So if he did, he didn't know well.
It's crazy because I feel like I'm the polar opposite. I'm more of the, and it's one of those things we talked about a couple of weeks ago, just like trying to get over that. It's like fighting for safety and security because stability can kind of lead you down the path of complacency really quick. Like before you know it, you're like, wait, the growth has stopped. What happened? Was like you were fighting for that stabilizing environment, and that's what it is. But what I thought was interesting with this piece here is that he looked for a market space that was lacking innovation. So again, go back to the beginning of the internet era. He takes the business listings and transfers those online for at least the first version of what we see Google to be now today. But then he goes back in and he says, I didn't have the impact I wanted to have. Like I want more impact, not money per se, but I want more impact. And he kind of surveys the markets of like, all right, what's lacking in innovation?
Right.
And he comes across the financial industry. Now, it's not mentioned in that clip, but he later collaborates with the company that we know as PayPal.
Yep.
And his strategy, two things that he focused on here, right? One thing, and this is kind of against what I believe because my personal experience taught me not to do this, but his strategy is to focus after one key player in the marketplace, which at the time was eBay. And if you remember back in those days, this is when people were just starting to sell product online. And this was a little bit uncomfortable. Like, wait, you're going to pay money and not have something that you walk out of the store with? Like you're going to give your money to somebody and wait to get product. Like think about it in that sense, right? Like it's totally against what we're accustomed to back in the day. But he focuses on eBay to start giving that safety measure, or that measure of safety for both the seller and the buyer. And that ends up becoming one of his key players. When you look at today's world, right, like just from a business and branding standpoint, I don't know how easy it is to find some of those gaps or some of those things that haven't been done yet. But we hear CJ and we followed his teaching quite a bit. He always talks about successes in the not doing. What are some of those things, that maybe you're paying attention to right now, or that you're kind of like, just watching, maybe not fully engaged in, but just watching and kind of saying like, okay, this might be one of the next new trends or things of that nature. Are there any concepts right now that come to mind that you're like, yo, this has potential? I'm not going to be an early adapter. I don't want to jump just yet, but there are some things that brands, product-based brands or businesses are not really capitalizing on yet that you feel there's a gap for or an opportunity for someone to go out and make it happen. And if you don't want to share all of it because they got to cut a check, I understand that too. So we'll save. Let's give them a teaser. Give them a teaser.
So this is the thing. So I try not to be the future predictor kind of vibe, right? I'm more of I look at the different industries and I try to see what that industry is not necessarily doing, but kind of just surveying it, right? So looking at whether it is music, entertainment, authors, speakers, whatever it is, seeing what works for them, seeing what works for them, reading what works for them, but what's missing, right? For the most part, it's always the creativity and the virtual experience when it comes to COVID, right? So, like, one industry has the virtual experience on lock, right? And that I would say that's the music industry at this moment, right? With the whole verses and stuff like that, the DJ Nice, D Nice, and all that stuff. They have the virtual experience on lock and has people's attentions, whereas all the other industries seem to almost take a little bit more time for that. Now they're getting more into the virtual conferences and events and everything like that, but there still isn't something on a day-to-day basis that makes you feel like you have a true experience as if you were outside. So I still think that's a little bit of a gap that's missing. Like feeling as if you did go into the store and you're surveying it and everything like that. There's a bunch of stuff that you said that's a whole nother conversation, but I feel like the virtual experience is still kind of more of a gap. And if they can integrate AR a little bit more during this COVID season, I think that would be a whole new level of situations. But
I like that because I was just thinking about that. I was like, what does a product demo look like in a virtual world, right? Because again, we're focused, or at least trying to draw a parallel to those product-based businesses, or if you have an idea or information, right, and you're focused more so on monetizing through products, it's like how do you do that? Like you can't hand out samples right now per se, right? You can't do some of the stuff that you could do pre-COVID. So it's like, how do you do that? And you mentioned, is it AR or VR?
AR. So
yeah, so it's like,
for example, sort of like this. So I like what the NBA is doing right now, right? I like how they have like their fans like pop up and waving and all that great stuff. Like I want to know how to get into the seats of the fans and everything. But imagine if that was not just that one screen. Imagine if you had the experience where you could see it in your living room, not necessarily on the computer, but you see it right then and there. So there's an option of either being in the audience, seeing it like that, or that it's actually in your living room. The whole basketball court is up and down, and you can see it no matter what angle you hit. So I think that's what's missing as far as physical events. If they can figure out how to do AR like that, I think that would be fire.
Wow.